If it's a crime to reveal the crimes of your government, are you safe or free? Right now, Julian Assange is stuck in solitary confinement for doing just that. This case seeks to criminalize revealing the crimes of your government. Horrific crimes. Kia ora, Matt O'Brien here. I'm at the Royal Courts of Justice in London. Just had 2 days of the Assange hearings. Fox News was not allowed to monitor this trial. I got a window in, so I'd like to share what I saw with you. First, who is Julian Assange and what's at stake here for all of us? Julian Assange is an Australian journalist in jail in England and facing 175 years in the United States for revealing their state crimes, including award-winning journalism credited with ending the illegal invasion of Iraq, which killed millions of people. Julian's asking for a High Court appeal in the UK, but if he's denied, he could be put straight on a CIA plane to spend the rest of his life in solitary confinement in a US supermax prison. How does this affect you? Well, let me ask you, if it's a crime to reveal the crimes of your government, are you safe or free? This is the most consequential attack on all our freedoms in centuries. I'm going to provide my report from the recent hearing in London, as well as give you context from evidence in the trial along the way. So let's get into it. Here's my sketch. That's Julian's lawyers at the front, and then Julian's family in the front row. Julian's lawyers, day one, saying the publications that Julian's being prosecuted for were the most important truthful revelations of US state criminal behavior in US history. So that's what we're dealing with, okay? They're arguing that he shouldn't be extradited for various reasons because he's exposing state crimes, one being that that's a political act. Exposing state-level criminality is a political act and deserves protection. So the act of publishing evidence of state crimes equates in law to opposition to the machinery of the state. Obviously very important, isn't it? They also said that this is the first prosecution of its kind of using the Espionage Act against a journalist in US history. The reason this is important is that they can use a legal precedent. Once they do it once, it becomes a rubber stamp. They can use it again and again. So this case seeks to criminalize revealing the crimes of your government. Horrific crimes. Drone strikes on children, torture, mass surveillance, the whole lot. We got to hear arguments like, well, prosecuting someone for revealing state crimes is protected. You'd like to think that you can't prosecute someone for revealing state crimes, straight up. But on that point, a national security person might say, well, classified documents. But what's so archaic about it is that the Espionage Act doesn't afford you a public interest defense. You go into the courtroom under the Espionage Act in the United States, the judge will say, did you publish these classified documents? And I'll have to say, yes, I did, Your Honor. I did it because, and the judge will say, shut your mouth. You're not allowed to tell the jury why you published it. You're not allowed to tell the jury what you published, even if it was, and it was, evidence of horrific state-level crimes. Strasbourg regards the exposure of state-level crimes as the highest level of public interest. Of course it is. That's the heart of this case. They're making revealing state crimes a crime for which there is no defense. These are the most atrocious crimes on the planet. The type of crimes that are beaming to your phone 24 hours a day now from Gaza. That's the silver lining of this terrible cloud of Gaza, is that now when I tell people Julian's in jail for revealing war crimes, they actually know what a war crime looks like. That wasn't the case until recently. To free Gaza, to free any country that's being bombed horrifically with war crimes happening, just to know about them, the right to know about them, we must free Julian. Imagine that, you can be locked up for life just for revealing them. We're really talking about the keys to justice here, Magna Carta, the rule of law, that the state must abide by it too. It was wonderful to hear these substantive arguments coming back.
This hearing was an appeal based on the entire case. So we got to hear arguments put back through, which are the really important ones. The one that was most important to me was this one. Hold on. Julian's lawyers said the exposure of these crimes had the potential to bring them to an end. In fact, they did. Drone strikes in Pakistan ended. Helicopter strikes in Iraq ended. The war in Iraq came to an end. So here we really have a journalist being prosecuted and jailed for ending a war with truthful journalism. WikiLeaks published evidence of US troops going into a home in Iraq and murdering 2 children under the age of 5 who were handcuffed, shooting them in the back of the head. and a grandmother. The Iraqi government got hold of this from WikiLeaks and told Obama that they were going to start reporting these war crimes to the ICC. 2 weeks later, Obama announces the withdrawal of US troops from Iraq. So here we have Julian Assange, credited with ending an illegal invasion that killed millions of people, being prosecuted and facing 175 years in jail for ending a war with truth. What chance do we have of ever having any kind of justice or peace in this world if the US can reach out across the Atlantic and jail an Australian journalist for 175 years for ending one of their illegal invasions that killed millions of innocent people? I'm telling you folks, this is one we have to stop.
They said crosses a new legal frontier. There is a spurious and unsubstantiated allegation we'll get into relating to computer intrusion, but there's no evidence to back it up. There is no evidence he did anything but receive and publish. So Julian Assange was aware that they'd never had an Espionage Act case against a publisher before. He stuck to that role.
You've played outside the United States' rule.
No, we play inside the rules. There's a special set of rules for soldiers, for members of the State Department disclosing classified information. There's not a special set of rules for publishers. The First Amendment, it covers the case, and there's been no precedent that I'm aware of prosecuting a publisher for espionage.
So while this Espionage Act law did exist, it was promised when it was written back in 1912 and then 1917 reformed that it would never be used against publishing. And it never has been. They kept that promise for 97 years until they prosecuted Julian. This is a problem because law must be foreseeable to prevent it being arbitrary. It was also pointed out that capital offence could be added. Non-refoulement, you can't send someone where they could be facing capital punishment. The judge asked the US counsel whether other charges could be added that would expose them to the death penalty. The US counsel said there's no way they can assure the judge that it won't be. So, there you go. Needless to say, even if he's put in solitary confinement 24 hours a day for 175 years, he will die sooner or later anyway. Day 2, this is the US counsel lady here. Just to give you a picture of body language, when it started, she had her arms folded and as if she wasn't sure how she was going to come out of this looking good. Body language can say a lot. The US in the morning outlined the arguments, first of all, saying none of this applies because Julian Assange is not a journalist. Which is an outrageous claim, really. Julian is the most awarded journalist alive, a member of countless media unions around the world, and there's so many experts, including the New York Times and the Guardian editors, say that these are journalistic practices that are being criminalized. So there's that. But they also surprised me by saying that Chelsea Manning is not a whistleblower. That shocked me. I was like, what? Because she uploaded documents to WikiLeaks. Like, what does that mean? Because she used the internet. She's not a whistleblower. Like, she's not photocopying them. One thing that stood out in my ears, if anyone's wondering if there's any substance to the hacking smears around Julian, the counsel for the US said, had they been able to crack a password hash, had they been able to, in other words, they weren't able to, we knew this, it would have allowed Chelsea Manning to remain anonymous. Now, a journalist helping a source to remain anonymous is actually a very responsible part of journalistic practice, but there isn't even any evidence to support this allegation. In fact, the evidence suggests it had nothing to do with her leaking. What is also not being substantiated is that Julian is the one that tried to help Manning crack a hash. The hacking allegation revolves around a Jabber chat, where Chelsea Manning asks someone for help to decode a hash. Now, it's never been proven that that was Assange. Patrick Eller, the former Command Digital Forensic Examiner for the US Army, no less, said that Manning had already uploaded hundreds of thousands of documents to WikiLeaks before this chat, and that decoding this hash would have given her no more anonymity or access to classified material that she already had. Another motive for her to decode this hash was, however, supported. Eller said Manning's colleagues regularly asked her for help installing unauthorized files and programs, including music software that they like to use. Access to an admin account would have allowed her to install programs, but would not have allowed her to download data anonymously or given her access to other information. Manning's computer was re-imaged a couple of days prior to this chat, and unauthorized programs would have to be reinstalled. Evidence that could have proved this beyond a doubt was requested by Manning's lawyers in her court-martial, and it was destroyed. Needless to say, there is zero evidence that Julian Assange attempted to hack anything. So the worst case scenario is that maybe, although it's not proven, Julian might have tried to help and failed to help her to remain anonymous. These are the words of the US counsel. She said it could have allowed her to log on to remain anonymous. But there isn't even any evidence to support this allegation. That's it. Not to access more information. She already had access. They also try to claim that Julian solicited her to commit theft of classified documents. This is the evidence for this argument. Julian said to her, "Curious eyes never run dry." So that's it. That's the best argument they have. Expert testimony has been given that journalists all the time solicit whistleblowers to give them information. Nicky Hager from New Zealand gave testimony at the trial that he's always going up to people and tapping them on the shoulder and asking them, "Have you got any information about this?" All he did was what traditional journalism is. He engaged with someone. In fact, they engaged with him. Chelsea Manning sought out WikiLeaks, not the other way around. So to say this isn't journalism and that's a crime, they are criminalizing journalistic practice that has lasted certainly for the entire duration of the United States and the First Amendment. Now the US counsel said that the reason Julian Assange is not a journalist is because he published the unredacted version of the files. Now, Julian originally carefully redacted all the files, but a version of the unredacted documents did come about, ironically, because the Guardian journalist made a book and published the password. The chapter heading was the password that Julian had given them. Someone found that, connected it to the original file, and published them on a site called Cryptome in the United States. But thankfully, the judge pushed back on this. Now, hang on, didn't someone else publish these first? So why are we going after Julian? Meanwhile, the US is trying to suggest that this isn't a politically motivated trial, which the extradition treaty prohibits. But yet, clearly, they've chosen to go after Julian, even though he's not even the first person to publish that. It was publicly published already, these unredacted versions, and they came about not through fault of his own, but he thought he could trust Alan Rossberger, a former political editor of The Guardian, to hold on to that password. So every care was taken by Julian. The experts testified, Nicky Hager from New Zealand and others, that Julian took extraordinary measures to protect sensitive names. He even phoned the State Department. There's a video of it on YouTube. He phones Hillary Clinton's office, the Secretary of State at the time, asking for help to make sure that any at-risk individuals could be protected.
To try and to make it clear, we don't have a problem, you have a problem. And we are trying to help you solve your problem because we are indirectly connected to your problem.
They refused to help him on that.
Okay.
So any assertion that he was callous seems quite insincere. But the fact remains, and this is not disputed. In fact, it was given under sworn testimony in the United States Supreme Court in Chelsea Manning's trial. General Robert Carr of the United States, who led a task force of 120 security personnel to try to find a single instance of evidence that anybody came to any harm by the publications of WikiLeaks, and he admitted under oath they had not found a single instance. So they're alleging that he might have put people at risk, but that no harm was actually made, whereas Julian published straight up evidence of actual civilian death. 16,000 Iraqis who were unreported. These were the most important truthful revelations of US state criminal behavior in US history, including torture and horrific war crimes, which led to some serious reforms. We'll also get into it. This was the afternoon, day 2 of 2. That's Julian's lawyer. These were the US lawyers. And this was as he was smashing their arguments to pieces. And they looked very dejected. She was looking down, he was looking off. You could just feel their body language. Oh.
Now, one of the other very juicy arguments that got put through the court for the first time was about the CIA's alleged plans to assassinate Julian in the Ecuadorian embassy. This was a credible report by Yahoo News, who interviewed 30 top White House and CIA officials who are alarmed by former CIA Director Mike Pompeo's plans to assassinate Julian. They were prepared to murder this guy on the streets of London, outside Harrods. It's a shocking story. So I highly recommend you check it out. It's a link in my bio. It reads like a James Bond story, like shooting out the tires of planes so it can't take off. Even plans to steal his baby's diapers to check the DNA. Oh man, filthy. You can't extradite someone to a country where they have a risk of serious abuses to their well-being. The CIA, by the way, would be in charge of his detention under the Espionage Act. So yeah, you really think we can safely send Julian Assange to the country that plotted to murder him in broad daylight on the streets of London? Yeah, no, I don't see that.
It was a good day, and I really feel that these judges have to take this very seriously. I spoke to Craig Murray, who's observed all the trials. He felt the judges had not read the evidence going in. Perhaps they treated this as if this was going to be nothing, but they seemed quite surprised to hear some of the evidence put forth. Repeatedly, they were asking counsel, oh, where's that? And they would say, well, it's on page 76, Your Honour. And they're having to constantly flick through the files that they probably really should have read going in. But Craig Murray came out feeling very hopeful that they're going to read them over the next couple of weeks. But I want to say also, and while that's really hopeful, and I believe that Julian ultimately will win because they have nothing on him, nothing that he hacked, nothing that he harmed anybody. This should not be being even considered. He should be being freed for so many reasons. He should not be in jail. Brings me to my final point, which is the bad news, that Julian was too unwell to even monitor it by a video link. Can you imagine how sick must he be? Because he was fighting to come to the last hearing they had here whilst he was having a stroke. So the poor man, he has not been free for almost 14 years. He's been in a maximum security prison here in London, Belmarsh, for almost 5 years, and solitary, most of it for 23 hours a day. Why? He's a non-violent criminal. All he's done is tried to make this world a more just and truthful and peaceful place by revealing corruption and criminality by states. Now, are we democratic states or not? This is the threshold we're at with this case. The US has a choice. Do they want to be a tyranny, or do they want to put their big boy pants on and remain a democracy? Yes, Julian revealed a lot of corruption, but he did it responsibly. He did it in an innovative way, using the internet, using encryption. But fundamentally, all he did was what traditional journalism is. Received the information from the source, checked through it to make sure it was important, redacted sensitive things that shouldn't be released. Julian does do that. He's not an anarchist. He knows that some things need to be kept out. And he did that seriously, according to all the expert witnesses. Julian's a hero. He's the greatest journalist of our times, the most decorated journalist alive. His case is going down in history. He's going to be like Martin Luther King, like Socrates. Seriously, we had this discussion this week. What's the most recent comparison to this case? First person came out with Galileo, and next it was Socrates. It's like, hello. So keep fighting, keep spreading the word however you can. Don't say, oh, what can I do? I'm nobody. There's a lot you can do. But even if there's a little you can do, just do it. We're all fighting this fight together, and I believe we're going to win, but it's a case of how quickly. Can we save Julian before he dies in jail, like Navalny? This would be terrible for everybody, including the United States. They've got to get out of this quickly. The best thing they could do would be to drop it and admit they made an error, that Julian did nothing wrong, that it was made in haste politically. In relation to the assassination plot, what kind of solutions can we have for the US and the UK to get out of this quietly? They should probably just listen to Australia and let them go home. Drop the case, drop the charges. That would be the best thing. And we've got to reform the Espionage Act, put a public interest defence in there. The question is for us, do we want to allow him to die like Socrates, or to be freed like Mandela? And for us to correct this injustice. Julian's done everything he can do. He's done his bit. It's on all of us to save him, and he stood up for us. If we don't stand up for him, then we don't deserve the next Julian Assange. And we may be unlikely, we may never get one. They should be very afraid. I don't know how that shakes out, but I know we must not let it be a crime to reveal state crimes. So do what you can, keep in touch. I'm constantly trying to provide information about this case and help you guys share information about it. So follow me, I'm Matt O'Brannon, it's an Irish name. And let's keep fighting.
If you enjoyed this content and you'd like to support me to keep making it, it does take time and effort. I'd love to spread awareness about this case. If you'd like to donate to keep the wheels moving, there's a link in my bio where you can easily do that with PayPal or your debit card. So thank you so much. That'd be much appreciated.
That's me, Matt O'Brien. Free Assange, free the truth, free us all.